Hi, I'm Eleanor, and welcome to this week's edition of the Intuition Lab. This week, I'm addressing the age-old question, is it time to go? And how to use your intuition to trust yourself and know when it's time to act. So, what are the signs that you need to leave a situation? And by that, I mean beyond the obvious, if you are in physical or emotional danger, then I would definitely say it is time to leave as soon as you can. Any hint of abuse, get yourself out. Now, if it isn't an immediate emergency, what does that look or feel like? Well, one way it can, let you know that it's time to go is that it no longer feels like a part of your routine. You forget to go. Years ago, I saw a therapist, and I'd been doing so for quite a long time. And one day, I just didn't go to my appointment because it completely slipped my mind. And it wasn't a cognitive issue. I had mapped out my day and it was in my calendar, but I just did not feel that I was supposed to go. And it completely slipped my mind. I was out having brunch. And of course, I apologized, but if something no longer feels like it's part of your routine, then that's one sign. Also, it feels painful or uncomfortable to show up. Do you have, a sick stomach before you go to your job or to a family obligation or whatever else it is you do? Maybe you take a specific fitness class. Does it feel painful or uncomfortable if you even think about going? Never mind getting there. Another way to know is if you're already talking about it, be it the relationship or the job or whatever, even if it's internal dialogue, as if it's done. Do you think of it as, I used to do this or I went there once? Our internal dialogue is often a little ahead of us in terms of knowing what it is that we need to do. So if you're already talking about it as if it's in the past, it's a good sign that it's time to go. Also, when you find yourself physically going there, do delays pop up? Do you run into traffic? Do you blow a tire, which I did once on my way to an appointment? Do things happen to delay your being there or taking the call? Maybe your phone runs out of juice. Just look at the delays that pop up. And if they pop up time and again, or it feels like there's a significance to them when they pop up, not just an annoyance, but this feels like there might be more to it. That's another great sign. Another obvious sign is physical or mental illness when you think about or start to go to this. So it's beyond the usual pain or discomfort. But if you know you have a social event coming up and you're in great health, and then the night before you come down with something, or you wake up the day of and you feel terrible, or you feel an incredible sense of unease, or depression, or a lack of energy when it comes to actually going there, that is another sign that it is time to leave. Another situation, another sign rather, that shows that it's time for you to leave a situation, which I have a lot of experience with, is that the environment changes rapidly. So you could leave your work on a Friday afternoon and you come in on Monday, and two people in your group have left. Sometimes it feels like the energy has changed really quickly. And that's because, yes, energy can shift in an instant. The physical world takes a bit longer to catch up, but you can feel the change. I've also felt it in friend groups where someone just says something and it's maybe even innocuous, but it just feels different. Or I used to volunteer with a local nonprofit, I should say, local nonprofit television station. So you can probably guess what network it was a part of. And I loved it. I loved the shows. I loved the volunteering. I loved meeting the show hosts who would come through when they were doing fundraising telethons. And then one day I showed up to volunteer, and the new volunteer coordinator was rude, dismissive, especially towards people who'd been volunteering for some time. And I'd been doing it for 3 to 5 years at that point, probably closer to 5 years. And I tried going again, and it got worse and worse. And I knew from that first meeting that my time there was over. But I held out, and things got worse. And eventually I left with a great deal of disgust, and I no longer support that organization. But just know sometimes if you are meant to go, an environment that seemed perfectly safe and happy, or just okay, tolerable, can change rather quickly. So, those are some signs that it is time for you to leave. Now, I'll go on to just that timing. Timing can be a tricky thing to figure out. Do you wait to be pushed? Do you jump? What do you do? I would say, in terms of waiting to be pushed, that is something you should do only if you're advised to. And by advised, I mean by checking in with your intuition, and I'll get to that in a minute. Also, with jumping, sometimes making a rapid change means that you've mainly changed your environment, you haven't changed the energy around it. So, the first thing to do when considering timing is to ground and center yourself as best you can. And yes, I'm going to talk about the energetic five state because you know how much I love talking about it. And feel free to look through my earlier episode that addresses just that. But there are a few questions I want you to ask yourself and listen for the answers. They may not be immediate, but they will come pretty soon thereafter. I would say, in general, the next 24 to 48 hours. So, the first thing to ask yourself is, am I meant to leave? Because sometimes things shift and we think, well, that's it, I can't stand it. But you're meant to ride it out because, using the work example, you have a terrible coworker and you think, I cannot stand them, I'm going to leave. And then you come into work one day and they're gone. Or better yet, right? This is the less than noble Eleanor speaking. You see them get escorted out for something. It may not even be something related to you, it might just be pure workplace karma, who knows? But are you meant to leave? And if you are, the next question is, what is my time frame for leaving? Sometimes the answer is not yet, right? Sometimes the answer is yes, you are meant to leave, but not now. And then there's the if not now, then when? And it can be annoying when you really, really, really want out of a situation and it's not happening for you. Sometimes there's meant to be a bit of a wait because other components that are leading you onto your best path are not in place yet. So sometimes it's better for you to sit there. So if you get the yes, you're meant to leave, but no, not yet, then you have to bide your time. You can also ask specifically, what is my numeric time frame? And you might get an answer straight away. And if you give it time, you may see something like you might look at the clock and see it's 6 o'clock. And you can ask, is it 6 days or 6 weeks? Is it faster than that? Sometimes it's pretty quick. But asking yourself, what is your time frame? And then being open to receiving a tangible or rather actionable response. So if you see, lots of a specific number like two, then that's your time frame. And then you further drill down. The next question to absolutely ask yourself is, what is my criteria, or rather, what are my criteria, and what is my trigger for leaving? So whenever we're in a situation, we often think of what will it take for me to stay? But here I'm asking you to look at what will it take for you to go? And you can be as specific as you want, but it has to be authentic. So it can be something as simple as, if I am asked to cover for this person on one more weekend when it was supposed to be my weekend off, that could be it. So that might be both a trigger and a criteria, or a criterion is you've accrued a certain amount of vacation time if it's a job. If you're leaving a relationship and you have children, it can be, well, when my youngest child starts or leaves a certain grade, or when I have saved X amount of money. You want to be clear on that. And it's not just asking yourself and your intuition, it is feeling the rightness of each answer because they're answers that we have in our head that are shoulds rather than this is what I ought to be doing. So know what your criteria for leaving are and know what your individual trigger for leaving is. The next thing that followed that I addressed a little is what should I do to prepare? So, does it involve if you are leaving a relationship, do you need to find a new place to live if you're living together? Do you need to scout out a public place to break up with them? If you're leaving a job, do you need to secretly download your information, get your references together? What is it you need to do for that next leg of your journey? And then my final, and probably for me at least, the most important question besides what's my time frame is what am I meant to learn from all of this? Because I'm sure we all have some experience in leaving a job, leaving a relationship for supposedly greener pastures that end up being just as miserable or worse than what we left. And that's because we didn't really reflect on what we were meant to learn in that situation, do the bit of self examination to determine why you ended up there, and learn your lessons because you'll just keep taking them with you from place to place until you learn them. Now, a few things to know. Leaving a situation is a time to be brave. You will get pushback in many cases, and sometimes you won't get pushback, and that will hurt as well because you want someone to fight for you in a relationship. You want a job to tell you how much you meant to them, and it may not be forthcoming. So it's a time to really dig deep and find your courage. And sometimes also you're going to have to break a few eggs when you leave, and it's scary. Sometimes, in a measured way, you need to have it out with someone, right? And that's all part of knowing what you have to do to prepare to get out of that situation. Also, know that strong feelings may well come up. You may feel hurt, you may feel betrayed, you may feel a sense of abandonment, even if you're doing the leaving. There might be a lot of fear about what comes next. And, that's where tapping into your intuition comes into play. What is next for me? That is another great question to sit in inquiry with. Also, know that once you set your intention to leave, even if you don't say a word to anyone, your energy has shifted and things may evolve rapidly. So, unless it's absolutely necessary, I would advise you to keep your own counsel as much as you possibly can and know that something that might feel like changing a thought, and you might think it's inconsequential, I just changed my thought, it changes the energy around you. And therefore, when you go into an environment where you previously showed up in a certain way, your energy is different and things will shift around you. It might take some time to evolve, but sometimes it happens rather quickly. So you need to be prepared for that. Also, know that leaving isn't always failure. Sometimes you got as much as you can out of a situation, and it's time for your growth to move on. Sometimes you have failed, and there's a lot to be learned from that. Either you went into something blindly, you were naive, you didn't see the warning signs, you chose poorly, and you didn't get yourself out of it fast enough. Leaving may or may not be a failure, but if you are convicted, if you know deep in your heart that it's right for you, that's your gut response, then it's the only course of action you can take. Also, know it may take longer than you think. There is an element of divine timing in everything, that sometimes we want things to change just like that. Like I've mentioned that I am getting back into shape. And yes, I would love to wake up and be in my ideal body again, but that's not going to happen. It's going to take about a year or so to really get back to where I want to be. And even then, there'll be room for tweaking. So it may take longer than you think. And if you're really frustrated in that in between period, I really recommend you listen to or watch episode 8 of this podcast called Meant for Me or Not to Be. It's not exactly the same situation that I discuss there as here, but it's similar enough. And I think you will find some guidance, comfort, and clarity in that. The other thing to know is that if you know it's time to leave and you don't act, it will get worse. You may be pushed out if you don't. So when you first get that inkling that it's time to go, start to act on it. Start to ask yourself the questions that I mentioned about time frame and what you need to do to prepare. The thing to not do is to just sit and hope it will magically get better. And like I said, sometimes your guidance is, yes, you're meant to leave, but not now. And finally, don't waste this precious life, even if, like me, you believe you get more than one go around on this planet if you choose it. It's precious. Your time is precious. Your experience is precious. There is no reason to suffer. I mean, there is a reason for suffering, but there's no reason to suffer needlessly. Sometimes you're in a horrid situation, like a horrid job, and you need the money, but you know you need to go and you can start proverbially looking for that other job. That is how you need to show up for yourself. So, if it's time for you to go, trust your intuition. Ask yourself the timing and the preparation questions I answered and get yourself out of it. I promise you, there is so much for you on the other side of leaving a situation that you are no longer aligned with. And even if it doesn't completely devolve, it will still wear you down because you are no longer aligned with it. And at minimum, it will just bore you to tears. And at worst, it will suck the life out of you. So I'm not being pessimistic. I'm trying to be as pragmatic as I can. But I say this out of so much love and respect for all of you listening. Your life force, your energy is precious. Don't waste it. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Please do like, subscribe, and share. And also, I am going to be announcing my new free Pathfinders community, where those of you who are making big life transitions, who have big questions about what comes next, and want to do so in a supportive environment where the people who are sharing this with you are also going through the same thing and don't really have skin in your game, so they're not going to try and discourage you from what you know is best for you. This sounds like something you'd be interested in. I have a sign up page. We should be launching in mid September. And I invite you to just contact me if you have any questions about it. Until next time, well, next week, I'm sending you so much love. Keep tuning into your intuition, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.